Welcome back to another episode of In the Side of the Storm. I'm Dave Larson here live, sponsored by Revelton Distillery out of Osceola, Iowa. No Marcus, no Brent tonight. This is a special episode in anticipation of the big Sweet 16 game on Thursday night against the Illinois team from out east. We do have a special guest tonight, and this is someone that I was connected with through Twitter, formerly known as X, and had some insightful information on the Fighting Illini, and really had insightful information on the Iowa State Cyclones as well. Really hit the nail on the head with some scouting information. So I want to welcome aboard Cy Illini. Cy, how are you tonight?
Hey, I'm doing great, David. Good. How are you?
Good. Again, Twitter can be a very amazing platform. It can be a very depressing platform. But this is one the other night that when you were posting some information, and I know you're not a professional scout, but boy, your notes were, when I looked at the Iowa State side, it was really dead on. You had a lot of good insight, and I was really excited to have you on to talk a little bit about Illinois and some of the things that you see in them. Now, give our audience a little bit of background. You're just not some Joe Schmo. You've got some allegiance to both schools, correct?
That's right. So I actually grew up in Illinois. And then went to school at Iowa State for 4 years. And, my whole life I've been an Illini fan. Never honestly heard much or cared much about Iowa State until I went there. And, I kind of just fell in love with the athletics, with the school, with the people there, and have been a, collegiate fan ever since.
Okay. And did I hear you correct? Did you go then to Illinois for an MBA? Is that correct?
Yep, exactly.
Okay. Well, I have to ask, and if you had not heard of Iowa State before, how did you get them on the radar and choose them for your undergrad degree?
Yeah, so I had some family go there. My uncles went to school there, and then my brother went to school there. But I honestly had no interest in going there. When I was a junior, senior in high school, everyone wanted to stay in state and go to Illinois, and then tuition for in-state at University of Illinois was very expensive. We don't have to get into details of that, but actually the out-of-state tuition at Iowa State was cheaper, and I also got a decent scholarship to go to school there as well. So it was it really just came down to finances and money for me, and made that decision and never looked back.
That's fair, and that's a really good decision that you made. Truth be told, I grew up a pretty big Hawkeye fan, and people ask me what happened because I'm obviously now a huge Cyclone supporter and a diehard. And so I respond back, well, I went to Iowa State and I got educated. So thus my allegiance, yes, it did change. And now we're season ticket holders, have been for
awesome,
probably close to 25, 30 years. I have a son who's a sophomore up in Ames as well. So
awesome.
We are fully embedded. So let's jump in. We want to keep this somewhat short. Obviously, the game is coming up on Thursday night. Give us some insights, if you could. What are some things that you've seen out of Illinois that you could shed some light on that we should expect to see on Thursday?
Yeah, and really the whole reason this came up is I was in Omaha for both the games, right? What are the odds to see both your teams play in the March Madness tournament in the same session? So my brother and I went down for the games, and I was watching the Illini game, and I said, you know what, I've never thought about it in a way where I need to look for advantages and weaknesses that Iowa State could find in Illinois. And so I just had a different perspective on kind of watching that game, and I was talking to my brother. I'm like, man, there's a lot of opportunity here that I just have from watching 31 plus, I think 31 games this year. So I love to start off with some fun facts I saw about just the matchup in general. Is that okay, David?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so I saw a couple of this on social media. So all time, right, it's 11-3 in the series in favor of the Illini. The ISU won that last matchup in Maui thanks to Talen Horton-Tucker's revenge game against his in-state school rival. He actually grew up in Chicago and played with Ayo Dosunmu there and decided to go to Iowa State and got his revenge on that game. So
that's right. The lone season that we had THT as well.
Yeah, right. He's kind of a forgotten Cyclone at this point. Brad Underwood is a 0-4 versus Cyclones as a head coach. He didn't win at OK State, I think 3 times he played, and then the Maui game and when THT beat them in 2019 was that. And the Terrence Shannon is 6-0 when playing ISU, so something's got to end there. Hopefully, it's the Terrence Shannon streak drops to 6-1. But he's undefeated against ISU. The time that we beat them, and Hilton, he was actually out that game. If you remember, Texas Tech was down to like seven guys on the team. The Illini are 4-6 against teams in the top 20 in KenPom defensive rankings right now. So, they haven't really faced a defense that's obviously as high as Iowa State's, but history shows they've struggled in the past.
Well, the interesting thing, according to KenPom, the last time I looked, I believe Iowa State had moved up to the number one spot in defensive ranking. And incidentally, Illinois was number one on offense. So this is truly a battle of wills.
Right. And Illinois is 2-4 against ranked teams, both coming against Wisconsin. And we know how they fared in the tournament, losing to JMU. So it's, honestly, those fun facts are fun to share sometimes and just kind of see things that, you wouldn't typically see just watching the game.
So one of the individuals that you made reference to when I was reading on Twitter has a unique name. I don't know if this is what you call it or if this is what the Fighting Illini fan base calls it, but it's booty ball. Can you shed some light on what booty ball is?
Yeah, so booty ball, funny story. So booty ball comes from Marcus Domask. He is a 6'6" back to basket guard, forward, if you want to call him. He's not much of a ball handler, but he's kind of taken that role upon himself. And some backstory there: Illinois lost to Penn State twice last year due to a player named Jalen Pickett. He was a grad senior last year, and Jalen Pickett just played post-up offensive as a guard. He just backed people down, and he dropped like 30 points in both games he played the Illini and smoked them. And in the press conference, Brad Underwood, Illinois' coach, coined that as booty ball. He voiced his frustrations with it, and he's like, just what are you supposed to do against that booty ball? So what does Brad do? He finds a portal guard, who posts up on over half his offensive scoring chances, and that brings in, Marcus Domask.
So is Domask a guy that they basically give the ball to and isolate one-on-one, and he just backs down whoever's guarding him?
Yeah, essentially. So, in the early games this year, they were running that booty ball, occasionally throughout the game. And then I actually read an interesting story on The Athletic earlier this week where Illinois was playing Tennessee on CBS, and former Villanova coach Jay Wright was on the call. And Jay and Brad met post-game, and Jay essentially said to Brad that, hey, Domask is a dog. He's really good. You need to really commit to this booty ball, because if you remember, Jay Wright's guards, Jalen Brunson were heavily back to the basket guard players, back people down, and it kind of exploited that mismatch. So Illinois has to thank Jay Wright for essentially coaching Brad on how to coach Domask and really elevate their offense.
What are some of the other dangerous players maybe that Illinois has that we should be on the lookout for on Thursday?
Obviously, Terrence Shannon, TSJ. He's not the same player he was at Texas Tech, that's for sure. He was really probably thought of more of a defensive guy, as was everybody at Tech. But he's playing his best basketball of his career. He's very capable of putting this team on his back. In his last 5 games, when I wrote that report, he's averaging 31.5 points per game. He's shooting the 3 ball really well. He's impossible to stop in transition without fouling. So he really relies heavily on free throws. But the knock on him is, he entered the NBA draft last year, right? Just to get some feedback, and the feedback he got was he needed to prove he can go right and prove he can shoot threes. And this year he's done that. I think he's shooting above 35% from 3 this year, and he's blowing by guys going right-handed. So I'd love to see Keyshawn matched up against him just because of his size and his skill set defensively. I think it's going to be a tough matchup for Keyshawn, but really I think Keyshawn's goal is just to not get into foul trouble and just to not attempt to contest any of his layups, because that's where TSJ gets his points. I think he's second, technically he's first most free throws attempted in the Big Ten. I'm not going to count Zach Edey because that dude gets every whistle he wants. So TSJ gets a lot of whistles too, but that's where the bulk of his points come from. So I think the game plan is for Keyshawn is really to force him right and make him uncomfortable, which is obviously easier said than done.
Right. Although if there's going to be a guy that can do it, it's probably him, right? That's one of the things that Keyshawn does, and we've talked about it on the show before, is that he plays at Mach 10 offensively and defensively. And that players don't like to go against a guy like that.
No, the Washington State game, right? Was it Wells? Is that he had like 15 at halftime or something like that? The Washington State guy that was just kind of going off on us. I think they switched Keyshawn on him at halftime, and I don't think he scored more than 4 points in the second half.
Yeah,
just locked him down.
And so he did not shoot well either.
Right. So yeah, as far as that, they have crowd favorite for Illinois, Coleman Hawkins. He also tested the draft waters last year. I think he had a lot more to improve on offensively than obviously TSJ's feedback, but he's the guy you're gonna hate him just because he complains. He whines, complains. We were sitting second or third row in the Illini game this past Saturday, and Brad just told him, "Coleman, I'm done," and just pulls him out of the game because he kept complaining the whole time about foul calls. So I'm sure Cyclone Twitter is going to go crazy about Coleman Hawkins and the crap that he talks to the fans and the gestures he makes. So he's an athletic. He plays a 5. He's an athletic, undersized 5. Not really much of a back to the basket player. He's a spot up shooter. I think he's shooting around 38% from 3 this year. And TSJ is going to get his points, right? I think it's really stopping booty ball, and they're trying to stop booty ball and really trying to keep Coleman Hawkins as really get him in the foul trouble and get him in his head, get him in his own head. That's essentially what it's going to come down to.
Now, is that something you anticipate Rob Jones being able to manage down low, or do you think that they're going to pull him out to try to get the Iowa State defense a little bit uncomfortable?
Yeah, they'll probably pull him out, and what this kind of goes hand in hand with I think how you stop booty ball, or at least try to stop the booty ball. I really think you need to double Domask anytime he drops below the elbow. So Morehead State tried the same thing in round 1. They tried to double him anytime Domask got the ball. He ended up with a triple double, right? 10th in NCAA tournament history. So obviously it didn't work out, but you're comparing Morehead to Iowa State. I got a lot of crap from Illinois fans when I posted this, saying like, "Oh, Morehead State tried that and Domask got double." Well, Iowa State's not a high C team. They have the best defense. They have better athletes. If Domask is backing down below the elbow, that's when you double. And I think Iowa State's really strategic with when they double, and you just got to force him to be a facilitator. And so what I think a great game film to watch if I was Iowa State would be Purdue. So Purdue beat Illinois twice this year, once at home and once away. And what they essentially did is they let Ty Rodgers, who's technically Iowa State or Illinois' point guard, they put Zach Edey on Ty Rodgers. And so what they did essentially was they put Zach Edey in the paint, just monitoring the paint. And anytime TSJ was driving to the lane, you're meeting Zach Edey. And I'm not saying Rob Jones is Zach Edey, but a whole extra guy in the paint is makes it a lot more tough for TSJ to get those open lanes. So Ty Rodgers can't shoot the ball, or he won't shoot the ball more than 5 feet away from the hoop. So I'd be curious if they watch some game film on Purdue and insert that game plan of just putting Rob Jones on Ty Rodgers and sitting him in the paint. It worked really well for Purdue. I think TSJ had 11 points in their one matchup. He was sitting out due to the legal issues for the first matchup, but it definitely is something to try, right? You got to limit his driving lanes as much as possible. And, I think Bob and Hassan Ward are great rim protectors, probably more leaning Hassan. But I'd be curious if they come out and at least try that to some point to see if it makes a difference.
Well, before we move on, I want to take a quick break and hear a word from our sponsor, Revelton Distillery. We'll be right back.
Why take the best corn in the world and make it into fuel when you could make it into whiskey? That's the question that launched Revelton, Iowa's most visible and fastest growing distillery. Owners Rob and Christy Taylor embrace the grain-to-glass philosophy, sourcing ingredients locally and overseeing on-premises production and bottling at their facility in Osceola. One sip and you'll agree that Revelton's handcrafted whiskeys, gins, and vodkas are the best you've ever tasted. And with the launch of their rye whiskey, made with 100% Iowa-grown rye and corn, and their new bourbon coming soon, there's more Revelton to love than ever. Iowa's own Revelton Distillery. ReveltonDistillery.com.
All right, I'm Dave Larson, back with our guest, Cy Illini, who has a degree from Iowa State University and the University of Illinois, and has some great insight on what we were expecting to face on Thursday night in the Sweet 16 matchup against Illinois. You know, Cy, you were talking before about some of the double team actions that that Illinois has seen before, and you're right. Iowa State is so much different than anything that they've ever faced. Again, number one in defense, and according to Ken Palm, it feels like that Illinois may fall right into Iowa State's hands, because literally, I mean, you've seen we double team every chance we get. We trap every chance we get. It doesn't matter where you are on the court. We're going to trap you. And it sounds like there's some players that may be problematic for.
Yeah, I think so. Marcus, like I said, Marcus Domask, they don't have a point guard. And beginning of the year, a lot's changed, obviously, since the beginning of the year. But Domask was bringing the ball up the court. And I promise you, he had at least one turnover every time, right when he passed half court, just from pressure. Again, I got a lot of crap from this Illini fans saying, well, he had a triple-double against Morehead State. Well, good for you. That's Morehead State. And I'm really concerned about Iowa State's pressure on him going forward. Tennessee, they played Tennessee early in the year, and I think he had, I think it was like 5 points against Tennessee, and they got, blown. Not they get blown out, but they lost by at least double digits. So it's the pressure gets to him, and of course TSJ as well. He only has one speed, right? He's like Keyshawn. He goes, Keyshawn can get this way too, where he's going too fast and he makes mistakes. It's going to happen with TSJ as well. And so I'll be curious to see how strategic Iowa State is with their pressure and forcing the ball to go to the outside towards the boundary line, and making them make those cross court passes.
What type of team has given, you've talked a little bit about Purdue, but what kind of team has given Illinois some problems this year?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, Purdue is the one that comes to mind, and it's really just because of their play on their defensive scheme they had on Ty Rodgers. It really forced them to take Ty out of the game and to put in their bench, which their bench is very one-dimensional. They have one really good shooter, Luke Goody, and then they have another kind of defensive player, Justin Harmon. And it's really just making their game plan, blowing up their game plan. And Illinois' offensive game plan is find matchups, find mismatches, and exploit them. It's an NBA offense. It's probably the least creative offense you're ever going to see, because it's literally, hey, if you switch on to me and you're undersized, I'm going to blow by you. I'm going to back you down. I'm going to take you to the rim. So, Purdue was a struggle with them. Marquette beat Illinois. It was a close game. And Marquette's kind of the same way, right? They Shaka Smart, very creative offensive mind, has a great point guard there. And anytime Illinois is facing a good point guard, they struggle. So I'll be curious to see if Taman can leverage his ability to find the open guy and create shots for other guys. I think that Curtis and Milan are going to have a lot of open shots this game, just because of the drop defense that Iowa State play or the Illinois plays. Anytime they do a high ball screen, the post man always drops coverage. They never show hard, and their scheme is essentially to give up mid-range twos. And so I know Curtis has a good floater in him. I know Keyshawn has a good mid-range, and Taman has some good mid-range as well. But it's really about making good decisions off that pick and roll, whether it's finding the guy in the corner, or whether it's pulling it for two, or whether it's shot faking and finding the big man down low.
How deep does Illinois go? You made reference that they're fairly one-dimensional on their bench, but do they go 7-8 deep? How far do they reach down that bench?
They're about 8 deep. They have, like I said, Luke Goody is a 3-point shooter. I think he's shooting close to a 40% clip, and that's essentially all he does, spot up shoot. And then they have Justin Harmon, which I think when he scores 10 points, they're undefeated. But like I said, he's more of a defensive guy, kind of like their spark plug. And then their third guy is a true center, best name in college basketball, in my opinion, Dane Danger. And they're well conditioned. I know Dane Danger is I don't know how tall he is, probably 6'10" center, 262 pounds, and he ran a 5:29 mile this offseason. So they're a well conditioned team. They'll run you back and forth, even with Dane in there. They'll be quick, and they'll run 2-3 guys deep the whole game.
What's one thing that if we look up Thursday and Illinois is able to do this, that will probably result in Illinois winning the game? Obviously, scoring more is the easy answer, but from a scheme standpoint, what's something that Illinois, if they're able to be successful at, will probably mean that they're more successful in the game overall?
Yeah, obviously the tempo is a big piece. But again, I wouldn't call Iowa State a slow team. I would call them a strategic team with how they play their tempo. But if Illinois can get out and run and rack up fouls on Keyshawn, I think they're going to be a tough team to beat, especially defensively if they're putting the right guy on Milan. Right, I think Milan's the X factor for Iowa State. I think he's got to make shots. He's probably gonna get Ty Rodgers on him, who's an athletic forward, who's probably stronger and taller than Milan. But it's all about knocking down your shots for Iowa State. And so if Illinois is controlling the tempo, and Keyshawn gets into foul trouble, I'm not sure who they put on TSJ. That's when I think Illinois is gonna kind of run away with this one. But if Iowa State can keep it close, I've said this to my friends. If Iowa State can keep it close under the 8-minute mark in the second half, I love Iowa State's chances. Now, if we're sitting at like a 6 to 8 to 10 point game with the under 8 mark, and 6 points isn't a lot, but Illinois is so hard to stop on offense. It just makes me nervous. You can't start the game. Iowa State cannot start the game on a scoring drought, right? Hopefully they got that over with Washington State. But if you look up and it's 10-2, 8-0, I'd be nervous, as an Iowa State fan.
I would totally agree with you. And that's something I had a conversation earlier in the week about, that we can't afford to start slow, because Illinois is just going to look in the rearview mirror and say bye-bye, and they're just going to take off. So it's something, you're right, they can be very dangerous. We have to be very careful on that. Before we go, any predictions that you have?
I think it's going to be a close game. Obviously, I am an Iowa State fan first because I went to school there, met my wife there. So obviously my loyalty has to fall to Iowa State. So I'm liking Iowa State. I think it's going to be a 1-2 score game. It might come down to the last shot. If you look at recent results of top-ranked offenses versus top-ranked defenses in March Madness, 2023, you had number 1 offense Gonzaga beat the number 2 defense UCLA by 3. In 2022, you had Duke as number 1 offense versus Texas Tech as number 1 defense. Duke won by, I think, 4 or 5. And then 2019, you had number 1 offensive Gonzaga lost to the number 1 defense at Texas Tech by like 5 or 6 points. So it's going to be a close game. History shows. If I was a betting man, which I may or may not be, I'd put money on Iowa State.
All right, that's fair. Cy, Eli, and I, thank you very much for your time tonight. Very insightful information, giving us some background information on Illinois, a team that we've not faced this year. Obviously, it's been a number of years since we have. You made reference the last time was in Maui. Appreciate your time and all of your insight. Yeah, appreciate it, David. Thanks for reaching out. All right, that's been another episode of In the Side of the Storm. Let's cheer on the Cyclones Thursday night on television. I'm not sure which TV station it's on, but I think tip-off is expected to be about 9:30 p.m. Central Time. And again, thanks to our sponsor, Revelton Distillery, and Rob and Chrissy Taylor for all of your support of Three Beards Media and this podcast, and Side of the Storm. We'll see you next time.